All right, this is January 12th, 2025, RAOA new officials educational Zoom meeting. Jesse Kralewski will start things off.
All right, thanks, Eric. Trying to get our uh, new officials program and content information compiled here and shared. So our first meeting, we had good discussion and good questions, and we were sort of getting the season rolling, and people were starting their eval games and doing a good job of trying to get that base going. And now we're at a point in the season where we're getting good questions, more advanced feedback, more things to help people be successful in the games. And of course, that's where we would expect to be. We're in January. We've all worked a whole bunch of games by now, across the full spectrum of the age groups. And so we're learning and growing. So a couple of the themes here tonight. In the first one, we talked about some more, the basic feedback, things that we're all working on, slowing down. And one more. Greetings, Austin. Welcome. Uh, Slowing down, basic mechanics, things like that. And so this time I want to take that piece to the next level. We know from a mechanic standpoint, the one big thing that we've kind of seen in feedback with varsity officials and eval officials right now is, hey, we know we're supposed to be slow at the spot of the foul. Post, prelim, where are we going? 2 shots, slow down so your partners know what's going on, so that everybody else knows what's going on. We know when we go to the table, we should get a color, we should get the number, we should get what happened and slow down. We don't have to be in a hurry there. But I want to take a minute to talk about being mechanically patient or slowing down a little bit as plays are developing in 3-person. And I think Eric will have some good examples and hopefully we get some good questions on this. But when I'm on the court and I'm in a 3-person game, so we're gonna focus on that because there's a little bit more structure and less guessing to it. In a 3-person game, I try to simplify the game for myself. So I'm going to find my primary. I'm usually going to I might have 2 players, especially if I don't have the ball. I might have 2, 4, maybe every once in a while a few more players sneak in there, but I can focus on finding my players, my defenders, and then just seeing how plays develop. And it's really interesting to settle in and watch a post player set up at the block and say, all right, are they going to post up and try to receive the ball? How are they going to defend that? Is that player going to go to set a screen? Okay, are we going to show? Are we going to double team? Are we going to switch? Like what kinds of things are going to happen when they go to take the action that they're taking? So I think that's one thing that always helps me a lot, and I strongly recommend it, especially to anybody starting out. If you can build this in way before I ever did, it took me years to figure this out. But if you can figure out how to find your players and figure out what they're going to do next, especially the ones that don't have the ball, it'll really slow the game down for you and simplify things. And you'll be able to go find those players that are going to go set an illegal screen or run through a legal screen or hold the cutter, whatever it might be. So I think that's one of the themes that's come out of the last couple weeks of basketball. And it's all part of slowing down, seeing plays, evaluating them, and then deciding when we need to put air in the whistle, when we need to talk to players, or when we need to pass on a play, but have a really good explanation for a coach on what happened. Eric, does that trigger anything for you?
Yeah, I mean, as you do this more, what helps you become a better official isn't watching the play as it happens, but what Jesse's talking about is anticipating where the play is going to come from and where the hot action is going to be, and putting yourself in a position to have the angle to see what happens when the play develops. It's not just being in the Cadillac or the home position as the lead. Do I need to get a little wider because they're running their offense in a way that they're coming down the lane line tight, and I need to be a little wider so I can see that one-on-one coming down the lane at me? Or does this post player like to get it on the left block and spin to the middle every time? So maybe I want to stay opposite side as lead so that when it spins to the middle, that's their tendency. I can see that play coming at me versus looking through the backs on it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and then the next evolution of that, and it's one that you can try to work on and remember. And Rain and I talked about this before our game on Friday. I've talked about it in a lot of pre-games over the last couple of weeks. When we slow down and we find our defenders and we understand what they're trying to do, that also helps us understand if we have a primary or a secondary defender. And if I have people that are off the ball, if they go try to get engaged in a play that involves the ball, they're secondary defenders, right? So we need to understand who's got primary and who's got secondary defenders. And when we get plays to the rim, the lead has secondary defenders all day long. You know where they came from, you know how they got to where they're at, you know if they're in and out of the arc, you know if they're jumping A to B, all of those types of things. And so if we slow down and we find those folks and know where they came from, that's going to help us get those plays right. But then the flip side of that is also, I know which defenders are not mine. So it's easy to watch plays develop and get yourself mixed up in a play as a center or trail that's a secondary defender. Like, holy bucket, something happened. I got to have something. If you wait a second, you'll probably find that your lead knows where they came from, because usually they're going to have that secondary defender and they're going to have a whistle or have a really good look at the play. So I don't think we're missing a lot of plays from what I've seen on secondary defenders going to the rim, but I think we have a lot of times where we have two whistles and maybe we should have just let the lead been a little bit more patient and let the lead take care of it, because they have a little bit more information about the play than we have as wing officials. So something that you can just process in your head, like primary or secondary, that's my play, that's not. You can still see it, you can still have an opinion, you can still come late, but just understand who your players are. And if you have a secondary look and you need to help your partners out, then certainly do that.
And that thought process, because I know a lot of you are still working some two-person games. That holds true in two-person as well. The only difference there and from three-person to two-person is if you're the trail official, you have a lot more off-ball secondary defenders that you need to identify when the ball is in the lead's primary. And you need to prioritize which of those defenders are your responsibility, are the ones most likely to go get involved in a play on the ball, or is there a screen away from the ball to get them open? And that's where you need to focus with your off-ball coverage. And if you can do that in two-person, whether you're lead or trail, and find that off-ball matchup when the ball is not in your primary, it will help you adjust going from your two-person to your three-person games and kind of make that transition easier, because it's not an easy transition. I mean, we've all done it, but it it's definitely, especially if we're working a ninth grade game in front of an eval, to go from two-person to three-person. If in your ninth grade game you're focused off ball when the ball is not in your primary, it will make that transition easier.
All good. Any questions about that from the group? I mean, we're getting into more advanced topics, and that's great, but it can be confusing. So we're working through it. So anything that anybody wants to bring up right now? No, okay. The other one, I mean, communication is a big thing, and we can talk about communicating with players during play, hands, or straight up, or whatever it is. We could talk about communicating with players during the dead ball to try and help them understand why a call did or didn't go their way, or what we think might need to be adjusted. Hey, we might want to tighten up those screens a little bit, because if we land contact, we're going to have a problem. All of those types of things, and communicating with coaches, and those are kind of lifelong sort of learnings. I mean, I'll have interactions with players and coaches and leave and think, okay, I need to do that a little bit better. So on this one, I want to take just a couple of minutes and talk about communicating with partners. And these are things that we'll sometimes talk about in a pregame, but just want to make sure that we're comfortable, because I know going out, stepping onto an evaluation court, doing things like that, we feel like we've got a lot to think about. We're trying to get a passing score, or we're in the JV spotlight for one of the first couple times in these games, and so it's bigger, stronger, faster kids, whatever it is, and we're so focused on that that maybe we don't feel like we're comfortable communicating with partners. So I would tell you, when we're talking about situations that we need to talk about, the ones that always come up are going to be like, hey, we've got two whistles on a play. Well, now we come together. If it's not really obvious that, hey, everybody saw it was a hit, well, then the primary official takes it. But if we've got two whistles and it's a tight block charge play, we need to get together and figure that out. And those are situations where you want to come to your partners. So the two of you will come together. Third official should stay back, monitor what's going on. We can bring in the third if we have to talk later, but get together. And it's not really about my call was this, because it's all about information. I mean, we're going to get together, and probably the first thing in that situation we should talk about was, hey, is it a primary or secondary defender? Okay, well, let's get the arc taken care of. It's in play or it's not in play. All right, so we deal with that type of thing, and then you're just going to provide the information to your partner about what you saw, especially if it's outside of your primary. Say, I was doing this because. And then our primary official owns the call, right? We should be able to communicate and come to a resolution to it, but we definitely don't want to be in a situation where we're digging our heels in. And I'm sure it's this. You want to have a quick conversation, you want to share the information, and then we have to make a decision and move on. And I think more from what we talked about just a few minutes ago about being patient and knowing who your defenders are and whose primary it is, we should be able to reduce that. But every once in a while, we're going to have one of those situations. And you should know, when you make a decision, you go to the table, half the gym is going to be mad. They were going to be mad anyway, because it's going to look like somebody talked someone into or out of something. But when you talk to the coach, they just need to know, hey, we discussed it. This is how the play played out, and we had to rule however we had to rule. And you should be able to move on. If you get into don't let them overrule you, don't do that. Say, no, no, no. Just a discussion. I'm just communicating with my partners. We're trying to get a play right. So those are the ones that kind of like set a gym on fire. The ones that we can manage a little more cleanly if we want are like out of bounds plays. So if Rain and I are working together, we know, hey, if I go blue ball and he comes at me and says, yep, that went off white, I'm just going to hit my whistle and send it white. We're not going to talk about it. I'm not going to talk about, oh, I saw two tips and this and this and this happen. He's only going to come talk to me if he's 100% for sure. Because otherwise, if we get together and we communicate, communication is always good. But if it looks like we're communicating and we just we don't flip it, whatever happens, it looks like somebody didn't know what they were doing. So that's a clean communication point. You can take that, and I will say, hey, I don't care if we're going to flip the call. If you're 100% for sure, you're going to live and die with that one then, right? Yeah. The only time that we don't do that is if you're like, well, there was a foul and that's what caused the ball to go out of bounds, and I swallowed my whistle or whatever happened, that I didn't put air in it on purpose. You can say, I saved a foul, and then we just move on. But those are two really common ones that we see. You probably see as you're in the stands. You talk about in pre-games, and they're just ways that you can make those go quickly and smoothly, but just share information and move on with the game. Eric, anything specific to those two situations that you would want to talk about?
Sure. When you get together and have the conversation, a couple reminders and keys to that. Keep the discussion short. Bring only the facts you need. Well, if it's the out of bounds, I'm gonna walk up to my partner and say, if they have it off blue and I think it went off white, I said, I had it off 22 white last. Did you have something different? And they're gonna say, nope, I'll change it. Or they're gonna say, after that, I had a tip by blue. So I'm gonna stay with my call. And I go, okay, and I'm gonna leave. If we have a double whistle on a foul and the arc's involved, I'm going to come in and say, and I'm going to remember the number, but I'm going to say, I had the defender in the arc. And if they go, oh, then I'm going to give them the number. But I don't want to say I had number so and this and this and this and go on a long sentence, because what's going to happen is what happened to me yesterday in a college game, and luckily I had a monitor bail us out, is we lost our number because we didn't communicate properly. And by the time it was all said and done, we couldn't remember the number of the person that was going to be charged the foul. So you can talk yourself into trouble as well. So come in, if I'm a trail and my partner ships one that I think should be an arc, I'm going to come in and say, I had the defender in the arc on that play. We need to go restricted area block. And they'll go, well, I had them legal and they backed in. Okay, now you stick with the charge and they still have their original number. If they go, oh, okay, now we have an arc play. Do you have a number for me? Yep, I got 22. 22 white was your defender in the arc. And they can go charge the play to 22. You don't want to do that from 10 or 15 feet away, and you don't want it to take 30, 40 seconds. Come in with the right information as succinctly as possible, if that makes sense.
Yep, avoid look like we are having some kind of a heated discussion or we are arguing, because as soon as that happens, you've lost your coaches and you've lost your players, and then the rest of your game is going to be really hard. All right. Oh god.
Well, and the other thing on that too, on plays that maybe don't involve an arc and double whistles, a play that happened with us on Friday night, Jesse. I was center, and the play came down out of the trails primary right in front of Jesse. Jesse had a secondary defender setting up to take a charge, and he owned it. The primary defender that was beat, our third, was straight lined and couldn't see them crash in from behind. And the ball was blocked and going out of bounds after the foul. The ball hit out of bounds, and I could see Jesse's hand starting to go up signal out of bounds before I hit my whistle to come in and get that player crash from behind that I knew our trail couldn't see. So when we say patient whistle, you can always come late. Don't let the play have moved on too far, but don't hit your whistle. If I'd hit my whistle at the same time Jesse hit his whistle for a foul, that's too early for me to come from center and help. So that's another way you can kind of keep yourself out of the soup. Is it feels awkward, but be very patient when coming over on a help call with a secondary defender that's not your partner's primary matchup, if that makes sense.
Yep, that was a good one. That was fun. All right, and the last one, and I imagine we will have some clips, and any of them that have come from the state high school league, or were, especially involving shot clocks, and should we have had a reset? Should we not? I mean, those are plays that we can get together and piece together, work together on. We can talk to the shot clock operators and put things together. I would say spend an appropriate amount of time on it. If we're talking about getting 1 or 2 seconds adjusted on a shot clock, it could be important if it's right at the end of it and we had a violation or not. But if we're talking about the difference between 27 and 25 seconds, probably not a huge deal. Now, if we're talking about, hey, did a defender get in there and get a dribble and start going the other way, and then it got tipped away? So did we have a change in possession followed by another change in possession, and we should be at 35 instead of 20 or whatever it is? Those are ones that we want to spend a little time talking about. So I think the person that's in front of it or is having to make a ruling, just be really receptive to what your partners are bringing to you. Again, to Eric's point, bring exactly the information that you need, what you saw, what you know for sure, definite knowledge, and piece it together. So we don't have any monitors to help us, so we have one shot to get it right. We are the replay. Okay. That's it for communication. Anybody want to talk about anything on those items? It's meant to be open discussion style. We're just sharing things that we've been seeing and hearing or experiencing ourselves. All right, so then the last one, lots and lots of fan behavior situations over, over the last couple weeks, probably 3-4 weeks. And say in high school games, that's why we know where our site supervisor is. I don't care what they say to me. I'm gonna act like I didn't hear it. I'm gonna find the site supervisor, probably go to the table and have them called down if they're not standing right in the corner. And I'm just gonna be like, hey, that area, that person, whatever it is, they need to go deal with it. So in all these high school nights, there is somebody there designated that's responsible for dealing with that type of stuff. Just don't get engaged. Because we can back you as long as you follow the processes and the procedures. As soon as you directly engage with a fan, that's not action that we can back. The fan's still not in the right, but we haven't really done our job the proper way if we feel like we want to engage. So if it feels personal, you just got to ignore it, wall it off, and leave it alone and stay away. So that's in your high school gyms. I know if you're out working a ninth grade game, it you may not have a site supervisor. You're probably more likely to have a site supervisor type person at like a tri-state tournament if Dave's walking around or whatever. You know who to go to. In those situations, you can work through your table, but that could be the kids that are there. And if you end up in a situation where you have no help, and Eric can jump in on this one, but if you have no help and you're in a ninth grade game and nobody's taking care of business, it's going to be on those coaches. It's not your job to deal with them. You put it on the coach. They have to deal with their spectators if there's nobody else to help you.
Correct. If you are at a lower level game, um, and you have a fan issue, you're going to know what team they're cheering for. Use that coach. That coach is in charge of their kids' playing time. That coach has interacted with them before. That coach might not have a great relationship with that parent either because they're just as bad off the court on game day, on practice days, and they're dealing with them, but do not engage yourself. And if the coach doesn't want to do it, you just put it simply, coach, we're at an impasse and the game can't continue until that's fans removed. And that should move things along. And no matter what the situation, whether you have a site supervisor or you had to use a coach, even if you did it yourself, if you remove a fan, um, as of right now, I think ninth grade and below still doesn't have high school league
Yeah.
jurisdiction in those games, but let us know, send an email to Butson, myself, and Jesse, because we're going to follow up with the AD. We've had this before in the past. And we're going to take care of our officials and we're going to make sure that that fan is dealt with in a way that it prevents it from happening again in the future. So, if you have an issue with a coach getting out of line, we've had that at times too. Please let us know. We are here to support you and back you and make sure that if there, I mean, you guys can only follow the rule book on the day of the game, but if there needs to be a bigger discussion on moving forward, you need to be better behaved. We will make sure that is had with the AD and let the AD handle their coaches or fans as well. So
Very good. And we definitely want to highlight that right now because I think, or we know this from experience, the next 4 weeks are going to be worse. They're going to be more challenging. People are going to start to get tired of practicing, playing, driving all over Southeast Minnesota to watch games in the cold. They've been at it since November and people will start to get grumpy. As the daylight starts to creep back into our days and um, we get a little bit closer to those playoffs and the seedings coming out, people seem to get happier and things get better. So I would say, especially for this group here, if you're working eval games or wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, understand that people are going to be grumpy. Try not to let yourself get rolled into it because we feel it too. We get tired. And just really understand the situation. Try to kill them with kindness. And sometimes it'll be received well, sometimes it won't. But asking the group to just embrace it, take care of business if you have to with fans through the site administrators, take care of business with players and coaches, and just try to work with them and help them get through this stretch as well. Because I think a lot of them are going to be playing 3 games. If we ever get snowouts coming up, they'll be playing maybe 4 games a week. It'll become a grind. So just be prepared for it, and you'll be able to work your way through it. And you might have a partner that's having a tough night and they're getting sucked into the grind, and maybe try to have a sense of humor and help them through it as well. That's the end of my points for the January feedback and evaluations and things that we've been seeing.
okay, we have a question from Davin in the chat on 10-second backcourt call. Offensive coach yells for TO as the shot clock nears 25 and you hit your whistle for the timeout and the shot clock's at 25. Um, Absolutely grant the timeout, get them to their huddle, start the timeout, and then put the shot clock at 26 or whatever time you want to, 26, 27, however, whenever they yelled for timeout and you wanted to grant it, set the shot clock to that number. We put 2 seconds back on the other night in a game. Um, we had it in the JV and the varsity. In the JV, we just changed the shot clock because it was a JV, and in the varsity, at the varsity level, if you're going to add time back to your shot clock, you need to add it back to your game clock as well. Um, if you are late in a tight game on under varsity, whatever level, and want to add game time back to your game clock as well, that is technically by the rule book. If you add time to your shot clock, it needs to go back on the game clock as well because they should be synced. Um, but yeah, do not call the 10-second backcourt violation. Grant the timeout if it was requested before the violation and go from there. So hope that answers your question, Davin. Um, and then I have something I'm going to try and share here that can give us an idea of when we should rotate as lead and what we're looking for, and then kind of how to cut why we want the rotation when we want it. So we can all be in the right space. So now I don't have the ability to add officials on the sidelines here, but if you can see my cursor, the ball is starting on here. So this will be trail side, lead will be baseline, and then C is over here. And I'll hit play, and if it's choppy and it doesn't come through, let me know and we'll work around that. But um you're gonna see the ball work around the top, go to the post, and then kick over here. Once the ball gets passed from the wing to the top, our lead should be down in the close down spot right here on the lane line and ready to rotate because we have a post player on the block over here. Everything's indicating that the ball is going to rotate. So if you see it get to the top of the key and they turn and they're looking to pass over here, go ahead and rotate because you want to be, well, let's, you want to be rotated as lead before the pass goes into the post on the opposite side of the lane. That's allowed you to get settled in and turn and view your matchup. That's allowed your center to work up and get above the matchup. And then more importantly, it's allowed your trail two to roll down as if you have a game where they're going inside out with post play. You want your center to get down below this 3-point shooter so they can help on rebounding action and see their 3-point shooter, if that makes sense. Not every game and not every play is as easy. I mean, I set this one up for this situation, but that's kind of your keys is if you know you have an offense where they're going side to side and looking to go in the post, that's your key is when it starts rotating away from you, you want to get down and get over. I've seen not just on eval games, our varsity games, everybody seems to get to a home base and then they just stay there and we have no rotation and we have more players on one side of the floor and the C is officiating the ball and two other matchups. So there's 4 players for the trail and the lead to share and the centers trying to officiate 6 with the ball by themselves. You want to get over there and get that. The other one to think about too is if that's in 2-person leads, you want to start wide outside that player on your whatever side of the paint you're on, and as the ball goes away from you, that ball is going to pull you closer to it to your close down position to help across the paint so you can see that post matchup on the other side even though you won't rotate. As it comes back towards your side, you want to get as wide as the ball so you can see your whole lane area and your side as well, and then trail. You're picking up the ball around the perimeter in 2-person until it gets below that free throw line extended. Does that make sense to everybody or any questions there? All right. Another question we have is how late is too late to come in on a help call out of your primary? Can you talk about the thought process as the play develops? Um, my thought process is so that play we talked about in Zumbrota on Friday night, I had to process that Jesse had a secondary defender that he was watching for a potential block charge play in front of the ball handler, and that our Oakstead, our trail, was looking straight through the backs and he had no angle on the player that I ended up calling the foul on. And then I had to determine that it was significant enough contact to come out of my primary all the way to the other side of the lane and get it. And that took probably about 2 seconds. Like I said, the shot had been up and the player that committed the foul blocked it as his teammate. The offensive player stopped short of a charge, so Jesse ended up with no block, no charge, and the ball getting blocked out of bounds right in front of his feet. And that ball had already hit out of bounds before I blew my whistle. I don't have a stopwatch in those situations, but that's kind of how it goes. If I'm the trail official on that, I'm not worried about a cadence whistle. If I have a view of the primary defender crashing from behind because that's my defender and I'm not officiating Jesse's block charge in front of him. I'm officiating the defender I had from the perimeter all the way in. Um, and then if you have a double whistle and Jesse has a secondary defender on the front side and the trail has the primary defender on the back side, you can just get together and say, I had the person from behind hitting them before the block happened and go with that one. Um, so that one's your double whistle where it's not a cadence. But if you're coming out of your primary to help when your partners are straight lined, it could be 1 to 2 to 3 seconds before you hit your whistle. Anything to add, Jesse?
I, I agree with that. I think about it from the standpoint of being patient when it's your primary. So I want to see the play, right? And it's my primary. I'm going to see the play. I'm going to go, yep, I need air. So I'm at about, say it's a heartbeat. It's a second. I don't want to like see contact, air in it right away. I want to see contact, see the play, and then I'm going to rule on it. And so then if you're coming from beyond that, you got to be at the 2 heartbeats, 2 seconds. You got to watch it play out. Like Eric said, you need to decide that it's one of those calls that we got to have, we need it as a crew, and then you come out. So I don't think that there's a magic number, but I would say if you're, 2 to 3 seconds feels like an eternity, it's not bad when you see it on film. And I think that's a reasonable amount of time to process and come get a foul that's needed. Sorry, Devin, you came off mute.
No, I was just like, so Eric, you saw the foul and you're waiting for Jesse. So do you kind of wait until, I mean, you see him go up with an open hand because he's gonna um call the out of bounds. So then that's when you hit your whistle and be like, I had a foul on the shot block, and this is what we're gonna do. I guess what I'm trying to get at, when you guys do it or somebody comes in late, it feels natural. And as a new official, most of the time I'm like, I will let those heartbeats go and then I just kind of freeze for lack of a better term. Like, no, that's not a good enough one to go get. So just trying to slow that down, I guess, was what I'm trying to get at, not being very good with typing.
Yeah, I'm thinking in that situation, the timing of it, you're right, Devin. It's there is an art to it because if I had gone, I'm processing and I go, I don't have a foul, so the only thing I have left here is an out of bounds play. And so if I go here and then I go here and then all of a sudden Eric starts putting air in his whistle and coming across the court, we're gonna look ridiculous. I mean, it's gonna look awful. And it might be the right call. So there is a lot of nuance to that. So yeah, I mean, as Eric's sitting there, as soon as he sees me hit my whistle, and it's not like I'm not selling a foul, I did not have time to signal direction, which is great. Um,
Yeah, and this is not the answer you're going to want to hear, Davin, but it's the only way I can give it. Um, I've seen a couple 100,000 basketball plays as an official in my life. And when I was in my first 5 years, 10 years of officiating, I adjudicated those situations similar to what you just described for yourself. I worked with a varsity official on Thursday night, good official. They do a great job, but they had a weird play where a defensive player got bumped from behind by an offensive player, and that defensive player then crashed into a screen, and both players ended up on the floor. Well, the offensive coach is yelling for a push through the screen because his screener's on the floor with the defender laying next to him. And my partner after the game tells me, well, the reason they went through the screen is they got shoved from behind into the screen, and they just stood there and shook their head no at the coach because they weren't going to call the push through the screen. And I just said, well, call the push on the offensive player that shoved him into the screen. And he goes, yeah. But he just locked up because you don't, until you've seen it a couple hundred, 1,000 times, your brain hasn't processed that yet. And that's why we end up with a lot of double whistles, is because um, newer officials, we either get it right away or we let it go, and we don't. That 1 to 2 second process and coming in late is a hard habit to develop. Um, and Jesse and I can sit here, and whoever can have the Zoom meetings and education for you guys and try to help you along. But until you get the rep, it's no different than a fifth or sixth graders playing basketball for the first time. Until they get the reps in, it's always going to be a little awkward until they've done it enough times where it's smooth. It's the same thing for officials. Until you've gone through that process enough, it's just going to feel awkward. So not exactly the answer you're looking for, but it's the most honest one I can give.
No, I completely agree, and I think that goes back, especially for me, um, being patient when I post for a foul or a violation or whatever it may be. So that gives my partners a chance. If I didn't see everything, I'm not pointing in a direction or whatever. Um, that's one thing. Watching you guys, when my kid's playing and I'm not officiating, um, just to be patient. You feel like you're slowing the game down, I guess, when you're in that moment. But um, yeah, just a great learning experience. That's why I just wanted to ask and kind of pick your guys' brains on what goes through your head. But 100% just wraps it. Thank you.
I will say a lot of times, especially if I'm coming across the paint as trail or center, like that play in Zumbrota Friday, I usually hear a coach's reaction before I hit my whistle. And then I know the play's gone long enough where, okay, now I know, now I need to go get the foul I had. But yeah, it's tough. Any other questions from anybody? I do have the Minnesota Mechanics Illustrated website up if there's something signal wise or positioning wise you want to work on or have a question on that we could bring up and share with everybody. I think the biggest thing too is if you don't know how to access that, if you go to the Minnesota Central Hub where all your eligibility stuff is and go to the basketball tab, there's a link there to either give you instructions on how to download it on your phone or tells you the website to go to where you can log in and read it online. Um, all of you should have gotten one mailed to you either last year or this year, depending on when your first year signed up was. But knowing your positioning, knowing what the court coverages are, those are all key. We don't want. I've had a couple varsity games this year I've watched, and I've seen our lead marking a three that comes from the top of the key, and these are varsity, and people just not knowing the difference from their two-person coverage to three-person coverage to where their primary is and where they're supposed to be looking. So being in the right spot and looking in the right areas is half the battle, and then knowing the rules and when to enforce them and why we're enforcing them is the other. So
Yeah, and I think piling onto that, I've seen with my kids playing, I've seen enough varsity games. I think we get in a lot of situations where we have good officials that maybe aren't yet comfortable going off ball, or maybe we're not quite comfortable with our coverage away from the ball, and we're not going to go grab that jersey grab and hold on a cutter, or bad screen, or person pushing their way through a screen just because they feel like they can. And those are things that um you'll hear about, but they'll clean up your game. If you go and get one or two of those early, you won't have to have the 6 or 7 that are going to be missed later, and they do just kind of snowball and pile up. So definitely recommend finding your primary, knowing your coverage, and when something presents itself out there, go get it. Help yourself out. It's going to help you and your crew out a lot.
yeah, the first 2 to 3 minutes of the game are for you and your partners to establish the line in the sand on the fouls, the travels, where how that's when you can dictate to them, this is how the game is going to be played, and you're not going to get away with stuff. And if they don't adjust, you keep calling them. I had a game this year where we called 30 some fouls in the first half, and it wasn't until they got a halftime speech that the players finally decided to change. And the next half, I don't know that we hit bonus for either team, but once you start drawing that line in the sand and getting the reaches and the hits and the travels, stay on top of it and make the players adjust. Now, that said, when you're working some of your lower level games, I mean, my daughter started playing this year, and I watched fourth grade girls basketball on Saturday morning, and you can't call everything. It's a school of goldfish running around all over the floor. All 10 girls is holding hands, basically going in groups, and your seventh, eighth, ninth grade games are a little better, but they're not varsity players, so we understand. You need to get a flow involved in those games, but your JV games, your varsity games, the first couple minutes is where you can set the tone for your crew and get yourself off on a good start of getting the rule book enforced early. Any other questions? We've been on about 45 minutes, and we've covered what we wanted, so
Anything we can help with? Plays, program, anything? Well, we might be good for tonight then.
all right. Well, the final NFL playoff game kicked off just a little bit ago, so if you folks are up for watching that, go catch that. Otherwise, if you ever have any questions, I'm working on quiz 2. If you haven't taken quiz 1, every quiz question for the RAOA quizzes are plays that have happened to someone this year. They've all been sent to me, or they've happened in a game I've had. So it's not just made up stuff. These are actual events. Some of them we got right, some of them we didn't. But that's why we do the quizzes, so everybody can learn. If you have questions, work through your mentor. You can email me, Jesse, and we'll be happy to help you out. So, all right. Have a good night, folks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.